Welcome back. I'm going to start with a twist on an old joke. What do you get when you get 3 lawyers on a RFL legal panel? A good start. Okay, I kept it clean. Trust me, I want to go somewhere else with that. All right, Jim Kasoris is here. He's a criminal defense attorney in Manhattan, lectures at New York Law School, visiting professor at the University of Birmingham in England, and he's a trooper after coming back from surgery. Good on you. And Doug Von Oyst, founding partner of Carson Von Oyst, focused on corporate misconduct, selected as one of the Legal 500 and most influential lawyers in the nation, and he got back from Syracuse in the same day after a good trial. Again, good for you. Bill Aaronwald, criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor at Aaronwald and Pickett, and he just got back from Florida where he played very well. Okay. Guys, this is, I want to talk about the Christie investigation. I want you guys to pull the curtain back for me. Now, obviously, we know where the investigation stands right now. The governor inaugurated for a second term yesterday, but all anybody's talking about is the multitude ongoing investigations into the bridge mess, questions about Sandy recovery spending, and a whole lot more. You got the Assembly and the Senate both have issued subpoenas, and both will conduct their own investigations. You got a federal prosecutor also investigating. So is a local prosecutor. Civil suits likely in this, and even congressional committees in D.C. may get into the mix as well here. Okay, help me out. 20 subpoenas get issued to both individuals and organizations, and you've got multiple agencies that are involved. And Bill, do they coordinate with each other? Do they just mug for the camera? How do they not duplicate each other's efforts?
All of the above.
Yes.
You know, the hardest thing is that you can't force people to work together. Whenever you try to get federal and local law enforcement working together, it's a real problem because who's the tail wagging the dog? There's a lot of distrust. There's a lot of resentment on the part of locals for the federals simply because they think the federals are big brother coming in trying to run the show. You know, but in this particular situation, too many cooks spoil the broth. You know, and I think what happens is you have too many hands into the investigation, something gets lost. More importantly, I look at this and I'm saying to myself, where's the crime? I mean, there's no federal crime. Your interference with interstate commerce is a federal crime so long as it's done by acts of robbery or extortion. That's not the case here. I think oftentimes prosecutors seize any opportunity to publicize themselves, to advance their own career. And I don't see at this point any viable criminal prosecution either by the locals or the federals for what happened in the George Washington Bridge. The
governor's already said that at least his administration is going to cooperate. Help me out how the subpoena process works. Because we already saw one subpoena that was issued to Wildstein over at the Port Authority, and he basically said, no comment, or he took the fifth, and he didn't say anything other than his name. How does it work, Doug? They issue 20 subpoenas. What does somebody have to say? Do 101 for us, okay, 1L here. What does somebody have to say if they're subpoenaed and they go before, let's say, an assembly or a state senate committee, or for that matter, any agency?
Well, I'll say there's many different types of subpoenas. I mean, they have to identify what they're looking for, and then you respond to the subpoena. Do you have it? Can you respond? I mean, what can you give them? Is there a reason why you're not going to give it to them? Is there some sort of privilege that you're asserting? You know, so the 101 is kind of a broad thing, but I mean.
Well, and then the question becomes, I guess, Jimmy, if somebody doesn't want to talk, what can you do to make them talk? And if there is immunity deals, and explain the 2 different kinds of immunity deals, how does that work? Is it the first one to talk gets it? Explain how the probable steps will move forward here, because we know there's people from the administration, there's people from the Port Authority, there's people from the campaign, and there's people from the actual agencies themselves. The governor's already thrown 3 people very publicly under the bus here. Right. There's been a name also that was redacted in the original stuff. We'll learn about that. Is there incentive for some people to talk that have nothing to lose? And to get people to talk, how does immunity work to get them to spill?
Well, if you're subpoenaed to give testimony, you can invoke privilege against self-incrimination, plead the fifth, and then it's the decision of the respective prosecutor or agency to either grant you or not grant you immunity. There's no limit to how many people can be granted immunity, but logic dictates that if you get enough from enough people, other people are going to lose their chance. So it goes back to what Bill said. If there's no crime, how do you invoke the privilege? I mean, these are informational subpoenas. This is, you know, what happened, what were you told, who told you, what did you do in response to it? And if there's no criminal liability out there, what privilege is there to invoke?
The way it works basically is that only the prosecutor gets to decide whether or not a witness is going to get immunized or not. There is no Fifth Amendment privilege for a corporation. So if you're an organization and you get a subpoena, you don't have the Fifth. However, what the government's going to do, having been a prosecutor, what I would always do is I'd look for the weak link. And that would be where I would focus my attention initially. Because
Can I give you a specific, Bridget Kelly, okay, because she was Exhibit A, if you will, when the governor did that hour-and-a-half press conference, and he called her incompetent, deviant, every bad adjective he could throw at somebody, and he fired her.
Right.
Wouldn't you go after her since she's got nothing to lose, and they want information on the guy who not only threw her under the bus but backed over a couple times?
Well, but the threshold question is, what leverage do you have over her? If I'm representing Bridget Kelly and the government comes knocking at the door, and I know that there's no crime that they could prosecute her for, what leverage do they have for me? What am I going to be fearful of? They
Not
come
to be
in
naive here, but she won't, if she at all says, listen, I was working under the direction of my boss, so while she's not, prone to any criminality, she at least gets to clear her name, or be hireable by somebody.
But the point of the matter is, if the government is primed to prosecute the governor, even though there may not be any viable criminal offense, why am I going to have my client go in and cooperate without the benefit of immunity, knowing that she could wind up being seated at the co-defendant table next to him?
Just give me, there's two different kinds of immunity, right?
Transactional and use immunity.
Okay.
In the federal system, it's only use immunity. What that means is that your testimony cannot be used against you directly or indirectly, meaning they can't use your testimony to get other evidence to use against you. But if the government
Even
has
for prior bad acts or anything, right?
If the government has sufficient evidence, independent of what you've told them, to prosecute you, you can still be prosecuted. Transactional immunity is broader. Transactional immunity means you cannot be prosecuted for any transaction about which you have given testimony.
Okay, but here's the thing. You said there's no crime, but the bridge is a public tool.
Right.
If for political purposes, you handicap the public's use to use that, and then engage in a cover-up when questions are asked where the public has reasonable right to know, all for political payback, there's got to be some crime.
Well, the problem is, in this case, I don't see one. Okay, and I've looked at it. I mean, what do you really have here? You have basically
Misuse of funds?
Well, you have an obstruction of commerce. The bridge is a vehicle of interstate commerce. So what was happening here was interstate commerce was being obstructed. But that doesn't necessarily by itself constitute a federal or state crime. We don't see extortion here.
Yeah.
There were no threats made, at least as far as we know at this point. So that's really the engine driving this train.
How long is this going to take? We're talking months?
I'd be more concerned about the congressional and administrative investigations, because whatever they come up with could be a death blow to any political aspirations Christie has. But as far as criminal exposure, I wouldn't be terribly concerned about what the prosecutors are doing.
All right, we come back, guys. I want your take on not just what happened in the motorcycle case on the West Side, but who in the end should bear responsibility here, both in terms civilly, but also from just a general gut sense here. We're going to be talking about that as we have developments in the case and lawsuits right now. We'll tell you about both the numbers and who they're looking to collect from. Stay with us.